Hello and welcome to Connected with Krissy. Today I am doing a very special roundtable with two female healers, two female shamanesses, and they are really gifts to our community here in Florida. So I'd like for you guys to introduce yourselves. Marie, you start.
Hi, I'm Marie Conrad, and I've been doing some energy work since the early 2000 years. Started with Reiki healing, and that had led me on to down the crumb trail, as I call it, to some shamanist work and medical QiGong and working with animals and people. So it's been very interesting.
And that's kind of your thing, is like the animals with the energy healing? Is that sort of like what you really like?
I do.
Yeah.
I resonate. Yes, I've always been an animal lover and connect with them very easily. But I do work on people as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And what about you, Terri?
Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. Terri Dluhy, and I am the director of the Sentient Temple Healing Center and the College of Natural Medicine and Medical QiGong. I have since retired. My journey started, as most healers have, with a serious illness that nearly killed me, and have progressed on my journey in healing. And even though I am retired, I still retain my healing abilities and still reach out to people who need me. And so we're here to talk to Kristen today and discuss our journeys and what we're doing today.
Yeah, so Dr. Terri and I know each other. She was actually my very first NRT kinesiologist practitioner, which you guys have heard me talk quite a bit with Dr. Nawana about that. Dr. Terri had since retired, but that was my first little step into healing the body with electrical impulses and testing in that way, because the body cannot lie, and like our little minds try to tell us all sorts of crazy things. So Dr. Terri was my first intro to that, but also talking about the college, which, Marie, this is where you've studied, so I want to talk about all of that. Like, tell us about medical QiGong and what it has done for both of you individually, and like, so start on the, and tell them about your own healing journey.
Okay, would you like me to start then?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. As I said, my journey started with a very severe illness in the early 2000s, and I was pretty much left to die by allopathic medicine. And I was introduced to Doctors Dennis and Fern Alexander. They had started the Sentient Temple Healing Center. Unfortunately, both have since passed, but their work lives on in many of us. They were dedicated healers, and they brought me back to life. And I started working with them and learning with them, and they taught me a great deal. Marie was one of our students, extremely talented and a healer in her own right. The temple is now closed, but our healers are still out there. My healing took some time, but it was miraculous. After 2.5 years of being bedridden and written off by Western medicine with no hope in sight, they got me up and out, and I started my healing journey with them. And so it was sort of a pay it forward type of thing. And the school itself, the healing center, was very world renowned in the St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay area, but throughout the world. We had patients that traveled from the country, from outside the country. We had people coming from Russia. Dr. Alexander was flown to Istanbul to treat people. He was a very, very powerful man. He was a shaman who was ascended in the 70s by the Maya Indians in Central America, where he had gone to treat them out in the jungles. He came back and met his wife. She was a Reiki healer, and together they just formed this tremendous healing modality that was just so successful, and we were just so very proud of the work that we've done. Unfortunately, we got older, and it was time to move on. But
she's
like
enjoying her retired life
now. I'm
now.
enjoying retirement, but the important part. It's ingrained with us, and whenever our little antenna go up and we hear that we are in need, or people have need of us, we do what needs to be done. And so we progressed from shamanism and Reiki to eventually medical QiGong, and medical QiGong being basically Chinese energy medicine. Little different title that people have misunderstood, but I believe Chinese energy medicine is more widely accepted, and it's basically using the body's energy to heal, and different than things like QiGong, basic QiGong or Tai Chi, where you're doing.
That's what I thought when you guys said QiGong. I said, oh, the movements, but that's not what it is.
No, that's why medical QiGong is a bit of a misnomer, because people don't hear the medical, they hear the QiGong, and they think that it is exercises, and there's nothing wrong with those QiGong and Tai Chi exercises, because they're self-healing. The difference is with medical QiGong, it's the practitioner who has been taught to channel the body's energies that actually moves the patient's energies to where it's needed to allow that patient's body to heal itself. So it's very non-invasive. It doesn't even require any touching.
Or talking, you told me.
No.
It's not a talk therapy.
It's not a talk therapy. The patient basically just lies on a massage table as if they were having a Reiki session. But unlike Reiki, where the energy goes where it's needed, which is a wonderful healing modality, medical QiGong, because it is a 5,000-year-old healing modality, and it is widely practiced in China, but little known in this country, and hopefully that will change. We are taught as practitioners to channel that energy to where it's needed, so it's much more effective. And it can be used in conjunction with Reiki, of course, all these modalities can, but you do want to have the most powerful energy modality that you can, especially when you're dealing with very serious illnesses. And while we never say we cure, we do treat. And the Sentient Temple Healing Center was widely known and worldly known for its treatment of cancer patients, and for which it was very successful. So again, this is a very powerful healing modality, and hopefully in the years to come, as Western medicine more or less lets us down on some of these more chronic conditions, while it's great for acute conditions.
Absolutely.
Chronic conditions, it has some less effectiveness. We will be turning more towards these modalities that come from China, that are quite old and have proven themselves. And that's what we set out to do, is to educate people. And the Sentient Temple College of Medical QiGong is still up and running, and it's running.
Online now. Yeah.
Yep, it's
online.
It'll be online, and it's being run now by a doctor who graduated from our school, and she's taken over the mantle from Dr. Alexander, our founder. And so hopefully that will get it out to more people, because they don't have to come here to Florida where we're located. They could do it anywhere in the country and learn how to do this modality and start healing people.
I want to go back to when you were bedridden, and then we're going to get into the animals.
Okay.
I want to go back to when you were bedridden and that journey. It started as a little symptom, and then it snowballed over the years, and then allopathic medicine wasn't able to take care of that. And then how did you stumble upon, or how did they stumble upon you, Dr. Dennis and Dr. Fern, who actually were able to come in and heal you? And Dr. Terri wasn't just a little bit sick. And when we say bedridden, we don't mean like, oh, I have, not to take anything away from fibromyalgia, but I have fibromyalgia and can't get out of the bed. You had been placed in hospice, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's a very long story. I could spend the whole day telling you, but I will try to condense it. But we are talking about a chronic condition that started in childhood. And unfortunately, it was facilitated by allopathic medicine. I don't put the blame on anybody, but back in the 50s and 60s, the knowledge wasn't there. It was very common to put children, adults on antibiotics for very, 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 very long times, which sets up a very bad environment in the system. You add to that a family that wanted the best for their child, and so brought moi, to the doctors for every little, I shouldn't say every little symptom, but major flus and strep throat and viruses, and we all know antibiotics do nothing for viruses, but the doctors were under such pressure to prescribe antibiotics in those days. So I spent most of my childhood years, and in the winter especially, living in the Northeast on antibiotics. So that set me up right there with a chronic candida condition. Now you add that to also wanting the best dental work for me. So I spent a lot of time.
This was part of this.
Spent a lot of time, and my baby teeth had amalgam fillings, and of course my adult teeth then started having
Which
them.
are the silver that they don't really do a lot of that anymore, do
No,
they? Okay,
no.
that's good.
Fortunately, dentistry has come a long way, and amalgam fillings are not recommended at all. They were at the time the most accepted form of fillings.
Yeah.
Right.
They were
Both my parents
inexpensive.
had mouthfuls. Yeah.
Right. The technology wasn't there for the new composite type fillings. Amalgam fillings have been around for centuries, but what they didn't know was that the metals from these amalgams leach into the body. Now, most people can move those out. The body has the ability to move small amounts of metals out of the body. But when you add that to the yeast that forms from heavy antibiotic use, the yeast adheres to metals like mercury. So now you have a situation in the gut where you have this yeast and amalgams. I also, being 65, grew up in an era where there was no EPA. So there was no laws or regulations on what factories could release into the air. And coming from the Northeast, which was very industrial, we had leaded gas. So there were just a lot of toxins in the air. There was no regulations on insecticides and pesticides. This was before Rachel Carson's work. I could go on and on. Long story short, looking back now, I could see my health was debilitated, but you don't know that. You just go through your life and you just do what you have. As I got older, I started doing a little bit of research. These antibiotics weren't that good for me. Let's go a different route. So I started my own research in my early 20s. By the time I was married and had moved here to Florida in the early 80s, I was doing even more and more research, and never took an antibiotic since, but knew I had been poisoned. But at that time, did not know how to handle this. The research wasn't there. We didn't have the internet.
Right.
So I was reading things, I was joining groups and piecing things together, but never coming to a clear picture of what was going on. And towards the end of the 1990s and early 2000, I could see that I was spiraling down. And by 2001, my body crashed. I had gotten down to 85 pounds. As Kristen said, I was literally bedridden. It wasn't as if I had a sore knee and I couldn't get up. No, I literally could not get up. We went to doctor after doctor. Allopathic doctors had no answers, obviously.
What did they Did they diagnose you with autoimmune? What did they say?
No. Over the years, there were many diagnoses. There were, in the early 70s, it was chronic Epstein-Barr. They had no name for it because every year I had tested for mononucleosis, which was supposed to be a one-time illness, but every year I tested for Epstein-Barr, so they were calling it chronic Epstein-Barr. Again, no cure. It wasn't until mid to late 80s where it was finally named by the CDC, because there was a doctor in Incline Village, Nevada, who had a rash of these patients and pressed the CDC to start investigating this. And they came up with this name called chronic fatigue syndrome, which really made it worse for us because everybody just thought we were tired. We weren't just tired, we were fatigued, but we also had these other autoimmune issues. So it later was termed chronic fatigue autoimmune disease, or CFIDS. By then it was kind of too late. So people were coming up to me saying, well, I'm kind of tired too, maybe I have it. Well, no, you don't have it because you are not suffering like I am.
Right.
You don't have the pain that I have. You don't have this overwhelming fatigue. You're not...
Because you're not a wimpy person. I've known Terri a good, I don't know, it's been going on 10 years now, on and off. You're not a wimpy person.
No. And through this, I was still working. Albeit it was very hard. I had a very supportive husband, but I was very limited in what I could do. But I still was searching for help. I was flying all over the country. I spent years flying out to a clinic in Reno, Nevada to get help there. I was looking at local practitioners, but unfortunately the local AMA had stepped into this area and chased out any holistic practitioners. So that forced me to fly out of the state, Fortunately, in the late 90s and then early 2000s, more people were coming back into the area who had a little bit more knowledge. But as I said, by 2002, I had already been diagnosed, obviously, with the chronic fatigue syndrome, the fibromyalgia, which is kind of the next go-to. They also found Lyme disease, but there were a myriad of other illnesses that basically came from a weakened immune system. So if your gut is destroyed, and that is 80 to 90% of where your immune system is, you're going to be open to everything. So I had the most weird diagnosis, like cytomegaloviruses, rickettsias, you name a virus, I had it. So by the time 2001 came along, Lyme disease was diagnosed. Didn't make much difference to me because I was so violently ill anyway, and the symptoms were overlapping. Nobody seemed to be able to know what to do. So it was 2.5 years of just waiting to die in bed, in extreme pain, on morphine that maybe worked sometimes, maybe didn't. Losing my ability to sleep, the fatigue being so bad I could barely lift my head up. If it wasn't for my husband, I would have died, because he fed me, he took care of me, he was a total caretaker.
And you were young. How old were you when this kind of peaked?
40 something, maybe 45. 45 when I crashed, and I had still worked up until that point. To the best of my ability. I was certainly getting more and more debilitated, but I couldn't even stand to be outside. I couldn't stand bright light. My husband had to black out the windows in the bedroom. I couldn't stand bright lights or sounds or even motion. If I didn't know he was coming in the room and he startled me, and just the motion would send me to the ceiling. But that was all part of it. It was affecting the autonomic nervous system, which is the nervous system.
Right.
So it wasn't until 2000, it was the middle of 2003, when friends of mine who I had not seen in several years were Methodist men. I'm giving you my whole story now. I'm sorry, Marie. But
no,
okay.
We're going to turn this into 2 episodes, actually. So don't worry.
Okay.
I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go here.
Okay.
So we're going to turn it into 2
good.
episodes, because I can just edit.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you still jump in, but we're going to do 2 episodes.
Okay. I'll try to keep it short.
No, don't. This is because this is powerful for people.
So in 2000...
A lot of people have the same thing going on.
Right. So yes, like a lot of people out there, you have these vague symptoms. Allopathic medicine is not zeroing in on what the problem is. A lot of times they've caused it, and you're almost thinking you're a hypochondriac, but yet you know
and they'll
something's
treat
not
you
right.
like a hypochondriac
Yes.
as well.
They'll tell you it's all in your mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
there were many doctors, and there might still be some now, at that time did not believe there was anything called chronic fatigue syndrome. And they did think that it was either you were a hypochondriac or it was caused by depression. Well, it was the opposite way around. If you have this, you're so fatigued, you can't have a normal life, you can't interact with your family, you're going to get depressed.
Absolutely.
So, no, I didn't need antidepressants. I needed somebody to cure me of this debilitating disease, and it wasn't forthcoming. So now I'm at the point where I'm 85 pounds, I'm skin and bones, I'm eating, but I don't seem to be able to put on weight. I don't seem to be able to utilize what I'm eating.
No, did you have weird bathroom issues too? Is that why the weight was not able to stay on?
Yes, let me address that. I'm sorry I passed over that.
Because I'm like,
That's important.
why was the weight not if you
This
were
is
actually
important.
eating? Okay.
When you have a situation of candida or yeast in the gut, now this comes from an overuse of antibiotics, and along with the mercury that attaches to the yeast, it causes what's called permeability of the intestinal lining.
Okay.
Dysbiosis. Now, it's not openings in the intestines. They're very, very microscopic openings, but it allows food molecules and particles to move out into the bloodstream. And this is how, yes, you may end up with an autoimmune issue, but it also doesn't allow you to absorb the nutrients. So I finally did have one test done by a holistic doctor, which proved this, they call dysbiosis or intestinal permeability. But I was not absorbing foods, but the biggest issue was that I was not absorbing protein in the proper way. Now, protein consists of amino acids, and you have to have them in the proper ratio. My body was not doing that. that had to be corrected. Once that was corrected, I did start putting weight on. That did not correct my whole problem, but fortunately I got a little bit of weight on and I got a little bit of more of a fighting ability.
How did you correct that?
There was a special lab in, I think it was either Washington or Oregon, and from this very expensive, one-of-a-kind test that I had done at a lab in, I believe, North Carolina, they came up with a formulation. They were able to tell how my body was absorbing these amino acids.
Oh, wow.
This ratio was sent to this lab. They created a powder with this ratio that I mixed up in water 3 times a day. And I drank it, and within 10 days I put 10 pounds back on.
Oh, wow.
So I went from 85 to 95 in 10 days by just correcting this amino acid ratio from this
and was
powder.
that like a MSM glucosamine type thing
No.
for the gut, or what was in that mixture?
It was amino acids. It was
Strictly
protein.
amino acids.
Just amino acids. It was not a combination type of product. It was strict amino acids in the right ratio that my body needed. It wouldn't have worked for you
Right.
or Marie. It worked for me.
Wow.
Because of this test that I did that showed how my body was not assimilating the amino acids in the proper
Okay.
ratio. That corrected that problem, but we still had not corrected the gut. That took a much longer time to
Well,
correct.
it took a long time to get there too.
Yes, exactly, exactly. But once you heal the gut, you heal the immune system.
Right.
So my immune system was getting stronger, but I still had a lot of these other issues. Well, getting back to this 2003, where now even though I had put some weight on, we knew what some of the issues were, I'd been on some supplements, still wasn't well. And I had friends from Ohio who were Methodist ministers, and I used to see them every year. They'd come down on vacation. Had not seen them in a couple of years because I was too sick to see anybody. I just could not interact with people. But very spiritual people, and she told me that she needed to see me this time. And so I told my husband, I need to see them because I don't think I'm going to see anybody shortly. I'm not going to last long for this world, so I wanted to see them. And God was pushing us in this direction. And she had been getting, her spirits were talking to her. They always do.
Absolutely.
Very spiritual person.
Yes.
So she meditates, and her guides were talking to her, and her guides were now giving her messages for me.
Wow.
And so she felt that she had to impart them to me, and I'm so glad that she did. And she said, we feel like we need to find you a special kind of healer. We'll do it. Because I didn't know what they were really talking about.
Right. It would be like a foreign language.
Yeah.
You're like, what? Yeah,
Really,
what?
because I was in dentistry for 25 years. I knew the clinical world. I didn't know the spiritual world or even the holistic world, even though I had done a lot of research in nutrition and how to heal myself, homeopathy. I tried everything to heal myself, but I wasn't quite there. And that's when they found me, Doctors Dennis and Fern Alexander, who were just working in a very small little space. They, nonprofit. They weren't asking money. They were living very simply, just wanting to heal people. And they got connected. And
With the Methodist ministers.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, were the Methodist ministers not from here?
No.
They just were researching and trying to find you a healer here.
Yes. They were from Ohio. They vacationed here periodically. They were only here for 3 days. And within those 3 days, they found this couple. Now, there are a lot of people, they were looking for Reiki healers.
And this was sort of pre-internet days, too, so
Yeah.
they would have had to have, really dug
Yes.
and, okay, this
Yes.
is crazy.
And there were many Reiki healers.
Absolutely.
But she knew that they had to find the right one. And kind of I'll get to a funny story after this, but when she started calling people and she got Dr. Dennis on the phone, and he would have relayed this to you. He just passed this year, bless his heart. He will tell this story always, and we just laugh. When she was calling people and she said to him, now you're not a weekend warrior, are you? She didn't want somebody who had a weekend
Yes,
training. She
right.
knew that I needed somebody
For real.
strong.
For
Yes.
real.
Now, not only was he and his wife both Reiki masters, he was a shaman.
Yes.
And I just mentioned this, he had been
Yes.
ascended. So he had that ability to pull that universal energy, that light, that God source through him, along with the Reiki source. He used everything at his power. And my husband called him immediately. Within a week they were here, because I could not get to them. I couldn't get out of bed. So the first time I saw them, I was still in my bed. So the second week they came back, he said to me, do you think you can get to a massage table? It would be easier for us, because they were going to bring some other healers with them. And so 4 of them came the next time, and
Wow.
I was walking like Quasimodo. I won't demonstrate for you because it's rather horrific, but if you can just imagine Quasimodo,
Yeah,
that's
like
how
very hunched over,
Yes.
very weak.
my body was so contorted from pain and weakness that I could barely walk, and that's how I walked. And I got on the table, and they worked on me. And I think it was the next session after that, and I don't know if there was 3 or 4 of them, and Dr. Dennis had contacted, they were involved with a whole North and South American group of shaman. They weren't just, again, weekend warriors.
Right.
So they had been down in Bolivia at a shaman's conference where he spoke, and so he was connected, and he called a shaman down in, I think it was Bolivia, and he spoke to her, and he says, I have this woman. He explained the case, and she, and again, shaman are intuitive, and she says, well, I think this is what's going on. I have another patient who's similar, and she gave him some direction. And so that time when he came, he decided that he was going to pull out all the stops. He pulled in all the avatars. He said, I had never felt anything like this before. He said, I felt such a rush of energy that all the avatars came through him and into me.
I
No.
got chills.
I know.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm getting chills again myself, and this was, how many years ago? 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I still am getting goosebumps.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't feel much because, again, I was so sick. They told me my aura was just against my body. It was just, it was,
It had completely gone inward.
yes, it was barely there. And so that's what they were working on. So at this point, he was finished, and he was a little drained at this point, and,
I would imagine
and very,
so, yeah.
and kind of amazed. He had said this never happened to him before, but he just tapped in. And as I sat up on the table, I was talking to one of the other shaman from the Sentient temple, and I got off the table. Normally I would get off the table and I'd get back into that contorted stance. And I had been a dancer, so I usually had very good posture. Hadn't had it in several years. And as I got off the table and I stood in my dance posture, and it took me about 30 seconds as I was talking to this other shaman, and I called for my husband. I said, Joe, get in here. I said, I have no pain. I have not been out of pain in 2.5 years. I've been on morphine, I've been on other drugs, and I have no pain. I didn't know what to think.
Wow.
I mean, we were
How many
astounded.
sessions in?
I think it was the 3rd session.
Okay.
Now, the pain did come back periodically. Now, sometimes there's miracle healings, but the body is so ingrained to that pathway of pain.
Yes.
It remembers it.
Yes.
So that's what my body was doing at that point. So fortunately, they kept coming back, and it was a reinforcement. It was a repetition and reinforcement of that energy. And as they worked, my energy field got longer. They gave me meditations to do. They gave me exercises that I could do, that when that pain started to sneak in a little bit, I could catch it right away and dissipate it.
Wow.
And then it was gone.
Wow.
And I did not have that pain again. But what he didn't tell me during the sessions, but they told me after, this was about a 6-month period, not very long.
In comparison.
Comparison to
Yeah.
being in bed for 2.5 years, plus
Yes.
40 some years of being sick.
Yes.
He said to me, you don't know this, but while you were on the table, I was attuning you to Reiki. Now, I know you don't know what that is, and you don't know what the symbols are, but you now are attuned, so I want you to go back and I want you to start learning it. Sure, absolutely.
Whatever you want.
I will do it.
Whatever you want.
So he said, what I want you to do is, I want you to start healing other people. Distance-wise, I wasn't ready to visit anybody, but Reiki can be done distance. He says, I want you to start healing. And so, of course, the person I picked was the person that brought him to me. because she had health issues. So I took it upon myself to use her while I was studying my Reiki. Wow. Since I was already attuned, I felt like I better learn this stuff because I want to start healing people.
Absolutely.
Because now you get so excited when you see what happens and what can be done. You want to start healing everybody. Well, it doesn't work that way because not everybody wants your healing.
Yes.
But you learn that the people that ask for it, you give. And it's appreciated. And then the family and friends, if they ask, fine. If not, you sort of put up that wall and say, I'm here if you need me, but you don't push it. So then I spent training with them after that 6-month period. Now I had already...
and were you out of the bed and moving around about?
Yes, in 6 months.
Driving?
In 6 months. Now, we had sold my car.
I knew that.
Yeah, I told my husband, sold my car.
I'm trying to backtrack on little details that I knew that I wanted you to share with other
people. Great.
Like,
you have to remind me.
She wasn't driving, I don't think.
No, I had stopped. I could not drive. I couldn't be in the car. My neurotransmitters, now I hope that's not too scientific, but basically those are what the nervous system uses to keep you in balance, where I couldn't even barely drive in the car. I felt like I was in a roller coaster. That's how bad everything was off. So no, there was no way I could drive myself. My husband drove myself, but bless his soul, he kept my car in the garage, hoping.
He's so awesome.
But finally,
he's so awesome.
Yeah. He's got the best husband.
But finally,
he's the best.
After finally 2 years of having the car sit there and paying the insurance, I said, sell my car. I love my car, but sell. I'm not going to make it. There's no sense wasting the money. So he sold my car. And so, but within 6 months, I was starting to get out a little bit. Now, it took time. Now, I will not say the first or second month, but a little bit after that, he would take me out to lunch, or we would go for a drive. Just little things. So at the end of 6 months...
Sorry.
All right, the truth. Coming down. Don't worry about it.
I have to get a medic.
So I'll backtrack to...
the driving.
I'll go back to like the 2003 when I finally started seeing the improvement.
Yes.
And then we'll move forward.
Yeah, because the little small parts are what's important for people, because anybody who may be going through the same thing.
Yeah, and you have to remind me, because like I said, 20
I know,
years later,
I know.
It's like I don't really want to remember it.
Yeah.
It's there, but I sometimes forget the chronology of everything. So this was now June of 2003 when I first met Dennis and Fern. And we started working together. I felt it was a miracle healing, but that doesn't mean I jumped off the massage table and I started running, I started dancing again. It took time. My body was debilitated. But over the course of each month, we would go for a drive. I felt like I could do these things. I'd still have to go back and rest. I'd have to watch myself. But by the end of 6 months in December, I said to him, I think you're going to need to buy me a car. Because I think things are really turning around here. I think my life is really turning around.
Wow.
And so by that,
did they give you herbals and stuff, or was this just energy?
This was just energy work.
Okay.
Yes, I had taken some supplements on my own prior, but at this point they didn't seem to be doing anything, so I pretty much wasn't on anything.
Okay.
But by January of 2004, I started training with them. And usually they would have done this in a course called Multidimensional Mind, which Marie took. But at the time, since they had not gotten this together, I was the only one. I was driving down to St. Pete from Palm Harbor. This was quite a task.
Yeah.
But I was doing fine.
You guys were in this house?
Yes. Yes, we still lived here in Palm Harbor, and St. Pete, we're in North County, Pinellas County, and they were in South County, Pinellas County. And I was driving down there every Wednesday afternoon, and for 2-3 hours, they would start training me. And we would train more on Reiki, more on the healing, shamanism, remote viewing, distance healing.
Wow.
And so by May of that year, Dennis felt I was ready to be ascended to shaman.
Wow.
So I became a shaman of the Sentient Temple.
Wow.
At the time. And I started working with him. Well, I obviously lost my job getting sick, so I had the time, which all worked well. So I could go down there at my leisure and work with them because they had people coming to them.
Yes.
Nonprofit, they were asking for donations. They weren't looking for money. They weren't out there to make a fortune. They were just, true healers. They had a few side jobs that they did to put food on the table, but they lived very frugally. And I
But
started
Dr.
working.
Dennis was like big on abundance and like prosperity. Like he was
Yes.
pretty big on that from what I remember. I only met him a few times,
But if you,
yeah.
yes,
yeah, I was like, Dr. Dennis liked his nice things. Like I do remember that about him.
yes.
That was later.
That was later.
Okay.
That was the evolution. Now, he had come from a family of money, and he was used to the finer things.
Gotcha.
But at this point in his life, he had transformed
yeah,
what he
He's
wanted
living,
out
like,
of
very
life.
simply.
Yeah.
Yes, and he became a healer, and that was his focus. Now, as time went on, and we switched our focus a little bit, and unfortunately, I have to say that people took advantage of us as healers.
Agreed.
So we had to set some guidelines.
Which honestly, and this is for any healers out there watching, I think it's very important to set boundaries and guidelines for healers.
Yeah.
There has to be an energy exchange, whether
Right.
it be money or another service, like whatever. There has to be
Yes.
a fair, equal energy exchange. Triple E.
Yeah. Yes.
Triple E.
That's it exactly, an energy exchange.
Yes.
Now, unfortunately, in this country, money is the energy exchange.
Right.
Although when they were treating people in South America when they were there, they would take a pail of potatoes. You know, you're talking about very poor people.
Right.
And we did have some very indigent patients. We had one little gal who had nothing, who was dying of breast cancer, and she would bring us little trinkets for the gardens, or she would bring the gals a
Yeah.
little purse. That's the energy of exchange. We didn't
Right.
expect money from her.
Right.
But there were others who could afford it, who were taking
Yes.
advantage of us, and that was not a good feeling.
No.
And
Yeah.
in that case, you don't feel like you're really getting the results. Are these people really getting the results they want if they don't have that energy of exchange?
Yeah, I don't
Now-
think it's possible, but
Right. Now, by the time you met us, we had evolved much further.
right.
And yes, the energy of exchange had increased somewhat, but we also had more expenses.
Right.
When I first met them, they were renting a small, and I'm going to call it a shack because it was a tumble down little house
Wow.
on the beach.
Wow.
But when they finally could afford a home, they worked out of their home. So poor Dr. Fern turned her home, her lovely home, into a clinic.
Yes.
Not many
it was
would-
beautiful though.
Not
Like,
many
it was
women would
awesome.
do that,
Yes.
allow her husband to turn her home
Yes.
into a clinic. So yes, they were frugal in some ways. We didn't have a big expensive clinic. We worked out of their home. We taught out of their home. You know, we were very fortunate at that point to find a nice piece of property in town that was very secluded where we could do our healings, and we weren't bothered by neighbors. We weren't bothered by Western medicine people who
Wanted to like take you down.
Yeah,
for lack of a
who
better
didn't know
word.
what we
Yeah,
were
right,
doing.
Right.
But because medical qigong and Reiki are spiritual and not regulated, you know, we were able to kind of go under the radar. We were a church recognized by the state, so we were able to act as healers in a nonprofit situation. But there had to be a money exchange because now we had this home
Yeah.
/ clinic that had to be maintained. We had products that had to be brought in because we were starting to use some supplements, some herbal heal. We brought some other, what would you call them, like the ozone machine? The
Alternative therapy.
Yeah,
Yes.
we brought in alternative, and these aren't cheap. You know,
Yeah, no,
you're,
gosh,
you're
no.
talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So it was to recoup these expenses. So yes, by the time and some of the pictures that you saw
Yes.
were old pictures
Okay.
of when he did have money from his family.
Okay.
So you might have seen him standing next to a Jaguar.
Rolls Royce is in my head. I can't remember.
yes.
I feel like that he told me or something
Yes.
like, you
And
gotta
he-
see my Rolls Royce, and I was like, okay, brother, I love it. Like he was
very-
like
that was
very charismatic guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
he did. He was very charismatic. His goal was to purchase a Rolls Royce, but people mistake that and they think he spent $100,000.
Oh, I didn't think that at all. I liked it. I was like, this is so fun. I was like, he's so fun.
He bought a 20-year
Yeah.
Rolls Royce for $20,000.
Yeah.
You can barely get a new car for that.
Right.
But that was his dream,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he loved that car.
yeah.
He polished that car. He deserved that car.
Absolutely.
He
Well, I think
was
healers,
very
this is an important thing to touch on. Healers should be abundant. It's a true service,
Yes.
and it's a true gift, as you very well know. It saved your life.
Yes.
I feel in many ways it saved my life, just like
Yeah.
I feel like you probably would say the same. So it is a true, just like an allopathic doctor, there should be a exchange for it.
And we used to teach
Absolutely.
that in our courses. We would teach people how to
Absolutely.
bring abundance into their lives. Why couldn't we? And yet he had detractors. He had strange people calling him on the phone. You call yourself a shaman or a healer, and yet you've got a gold ring and a gold watch. Well, yeah, he had a gold ring with a CZ diamond, you know. So some people have this really weird perception that to be a healer, you had to be Gandhi.
Have nothing.
Yes.
You,
And have
Which
nothing.
is like very
Have
old.
no
It's very
attachment.
old paradigm thinking, because
Right.
the new generation of healers is like, you know, my guy that I had the other day, the sound healer, rolled up in his brand new Mercedes
Yeah.
and doing his $300 sessions, and I was like, "Get it, brother! Like, get it."
If you're
you
seeing
know?
results and you're helping
Absolutely.
people, now if you're a
Absolutely.
charlatan, that's a
True,
different
true.
story.
That's a different story.
We're not talking about that.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about a true healer who's out there and doing good, who wouldn't pay anything to be healed?
To feel good. I mean, that's the
am.
thing for me. It turned my, like, the entire
your
way
life
that I
back.
feel, it turned it completely around. And not that there's perfection, there's not, because it's all, what's like peeling back the layers of
Peeling
the
back the
onion.
layers,
You know,
yes.
there's always a little something going on. Typically for me, I'm still not to the end of all my physical ailments, but my gosh, like where I was 10 years ago to now. It's like mind blowing. I mean, for you, you're like you.
Baby
Hospice had been called in. They had given up all hope for you,
Yes.
and here we are, 20 some years later.
There I
Now,
am.
because of a spiritual
Yes,
healing.
Yes, more or less, yes. Now, I took it even further, but like I said, miracles happen many different ways.
Absolutely,
We've had patients who had a miraculous healing first visit. Other people needed to come back repetitively, but they still saw that progress.
and sometimes the healing wasn't to live. Sometimes the
Yes.
healing was to go peacefully.
it's to transition.
Yeah,
our job has
transition.
been to transition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. We don't choose. We're not God.
Nope.
We just treat them and we give the body what it needs, and if the body needs to transition and God has called them home, then we're just there to help them through that.
Which this is something that shamans sort of specialize in, is that transition, which you know and you know. So let's talk
Right.
about that for a minute. Like, was that a big part of your shaman journey, or your shaman journey was to help that transition of like the kind of like when there's a birth, and that's what the midwives are there for, or like I think midwives are birth shamans. They were for me. They were wow, wonderful, amazing things to say about that. But you know, for you guys that have worked in that realm of shamanism, do you feel like that was a big part of your journey to help transition people?
I have transitioned
Yes.
people. Yes, I've transitioned animals too,
Yes.
because they need it also. I had a stray cat get killed out on the street, and it was still breathing when I found it. I helped it transition.
Yeah.
Yes, and I've had patients who were at the end of life, and I've helped them transition. Of course.
And what's that like for, you know, because you're a human still living in this existence, though elevated. What is that like for, you know, you guys in that type of situation? Is that heavy on you?
Very special privilege to be with someone at that time when they are transitioning and hold space for them. Just be there, and I know they've spoken to me. You know, for example, when my brother-in-law passed, I was on one side of him and my sister was on the other side, and he told me to go over to the side where she was, and that's when he took his last breath. And when he exhaled his last breath, she gasped inward, like she took that in. It was just the most beautiful, you know, and I was holding my sister, and it was just like there aren't words for it, or how to express that, but it is a true gift, and it took me back a ways, and took me a long time to come around from what had just transpired, what I had been through, the past month being with them through hospice and everything.
And so Maria, I know that you trained with Dr. Terri and Dr. Dennis both.
Yes.
What is your training, and what do you think you got out of the Sentient Temple, especially since you guys are going online now?
Yeah.
So like, you guys out there may be called to this. So what did you learn from your experience at Sentient Temple?
Well,
And how did you come to them?
Well, my journey. Oh, you want to know my journey?
Yeah, I
Okay,
do,
so
actually.